Pardon me. So he's the winner of multiple Eisner and Harvey Awards, and he's a legend who keeps the hopes of millions of comic book lovers flying. It's a day of extreme honor for us to welcome Mr. Mark Waid! And on stage for his exclusive session, he'll be having a conversation with Akshay Dawn! So you get this mic.
All right, we're good. There you go.
I'm actually really honored to be here, and I think I'm probably amazed I'm still awake and haven't passed out on the way up.
No, please. It's my honor to be up here, and it's an honor to be quizzed by you. By all means, please. I am an open book. Whatever I can answer, I will feel free to.
If you don't mind, I've actually got a nice long list of questions because I've been following your work for many years now.
That's fine.
I think I'm just going to try and start simple. The stuff that people most know you for is a lot of the work you did at DC.
Yeah, I think so.
So you worked on a lot of things, but before, I think what most people don't know is you started as an editor with them.
Yes.
And you worked on books like Gotham by Gaslight.
Gaslight and Secret Origins and I mean, yeah, several. But Gotham by Gaslight was one of the books I edited while I was there. Yeah.
From what I understand, this was one of the books that started what DC calls the Elseworlds.
Right.
Which is alternate reality. So, I mean, was that something you guys were hoping to work on, or did that just...
It just fell into place. What happened was I was working on an anthology title called Secret Origins, which were the origins of Superman and Batman and whatever. But the thing is, after 4 or 5 years of that book, we started to run out of characters. I mean, we already told Batman's origin. We'd already told Superman's origin. So it occurred to me, why don't we start telling the origins of the characters if they happen in different times? If Superman had landed in Russia, or if Batman had been, 100 years previous. And it became such a popular idea that rather than just keep it within an anthology book, they decided, DC asked for us to spin them out into separate titles, and that's what became the Elseworlds line.
Okay. Well, I think that most people didn't really realize it started off with something this simple.
Yeah.
I think most people assumed there was this large planned out thing.
No. Most things in comics just start out very simple and they grow into big plans. Yeah.
Fair enough. So after that, I actually just wanted to refer the next big thing which people know you for is, of course, The Flash. Right?
No. Yeah. Hang on. And it was a huge honor to work on that book. What most people don't remember was that anybody ever seen the American television show The Flash?
Yeah.
It was okay. It wasn't great, but it was on, and then it had been canceled. And so while DC had been publishing Flash for a long time, the sales, once the TV show went away, really started to slide, and there was talk about how long the book might last. And I was still new in the freelance scene, and one of my best friends up there was also the editor. And he said, well, we may as well give it to Mark because nobody else really wants the book because they think it's just going to die. So I lucked into that, and I managed to make a nice 8-year run out of it with some of the best artists in comics. So
I think most of us would actually... 8 years is not a small time to be writing any character.
No, it's not. It's really... I haven't matched it since, although I hope to get there with Daredevil someday. But right now, that's the record, yeah.
The Daredevil I'm going to get to a little later on,
sure.
But... if I can stick with this one for a while,
sure.
One thing that I was really fond of personally was in this run you introduced Impulse.
Yes.
Which is a character I think in the beginning nobody really liked or really knew that well.
Right.
But suddenly now, as part of Young Justice, as part of the Teen Titans, it's grown into a sort of a franchise by itself.
Yes.
So how easy or hard was it to make a new character like that?
It was easy to come up with the basic idea, which was the kid from the future who was the descendant of Barry Allen. But spinning him off into his own character in his own book was not... that happened almost overnight. What happened was we'd introduced the character in issue 92 of Flash, and we were going to do issue 100 coming up, and what we were doing up to that point is we were trying to fool the readers into believing that Wally West was going to be gone and that one of the other characters would be stepping into that role as Flash.
Okay.
And we knew that, we didn't want to tell the fans, but we knew that Wally West would come back, and all the other characters like Jesse Quick or Max Mercury or Impulse, some that I sort of created for that era, they were around. we, what happened was the marketing department came back and said 3 or 4 issues before issue 100, they said, well, Impulse seems to be a good character. We'd like to give that character his own book. And we thought, well, that wasn't the plan. We were flattered, but I didn't realize we were going to get his own book. So having to create his whole backstory and his whole relationship with Max Mercury and all that stuff almost overnight. But I was lucky to do. But look who I was lucky to do it with, an artist named Umberto Ramos.
Yeah, he's actually really big on Spider-Man.
Yes,
recently.
And he's just sensational. He was just, and this was his first big American work, and he really took to it. Yeah.
Nice. And I think, if I could stick with the Flash for a minute, one thing that I think stood out when your time writing Wally West was that you brought a little bit more science fiction and a little bit more the things that was popular in the earliest Flash comics back to the Flash.
Yeah.
So was that easy? Did people take to that, or
I think they took to that after a while. I mean, at first there was resistance that we were very much against the trend of dark and gritty and sort of violent comics of the era, and we didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
We just wanted to keep it pure science fiction and have some real optimism to the feature. But I was always a big science nerd in school, and I studied physics in college, and I always loved taking science and applying it into these stories.
I can relate to that, even though I was horrible in science in school.
Yeah.
I think what I'm going to move on from this to one of the other things that a lot of people might know you from, which is Birthright from Superman.
Thank you.
I'll be honest with you, this is one of my favorite versions of the Superman origin.
Thank you.
But I think it didn't actually last as long as some of them in terms of part of the Superman canon.
Right. I was a little disappointed in that. What happened was DC came to me in 2001, 2002, somewhere along in there, and they said, we would like you to relaunch the Superman origin for the 21st century. We'd like to contemporize it and make it feel a little bit more modern. But they knew I was the guy to go to because I love Superman more than anybody else in the world. And so I was very protective of the legend. But still, it caused me to rethink every single thing about Superman. Everything. Why does he do what he does? Why does he wear a costume? Why doesn't he wear a mask? All these things were questions I asked myself and sort of wrote down before I even began building a story. And the thing that I most had to bear in mind is that in the States, certainly, Batman is considered the coolest superhero, and to a lot of people in the States, Superman is dull and boring because he's not all evil and dark and, shadowy. And so my task was to explain to readers or show readers why Superman was a character that you could empathize with and care about, whether or not he was invulnerable. And I think we did a pretty good job of that. So I'm very proud of the way it came out.
I think you're right, because I think one thing most people have problem with as far as Superman's concerned is that he's almost godlike. How do you make that character relatable?
Right, but the answer is because, well, there's two answers actually. The first answer is because even though he's invulnerable and even though he's super strong, he's still compassionate. He still has a very human heart. So the way you attack Superman is you attack him through the heart, because he's as vulnerable as anybody there. And then also when it comes to relating to the character, that's not Superman's job. You're not supposed to relate to Superman. You're supposed to relate to Clark Kent. That's the reason he was created as a character. That's the character that we all feel like we can identify with, because we all know what it feels like to, whether we wear glasses or whether we're short or whether we're not the physical ideal, we all want to believe that if they could just see the real of us inside, they would love us and admire us. So that's something that everybody can relate to.
And in Birthright, you actually focused on the journey of Clark Kent when he traveled around the world.
Yeah.
And I think one part I liked, which I wish they had kept, was he has the ability to see people's sort of life energy, in a manner of speaking.
But you know what? I caught so much crap about that. Like no one in the States liked it. Everybody thought it was horrible, and I was just so disappointed because I thought that made sense to me. It's not that Superman can see life auras or souls or anything like that, but if you have that superpower where you can see ultra ultraviolet and infrared, and you can see things in the spectrum that nobody else can see, it makes sense to me that living things would have a different sort of glow about them than dead things. They would just look different to you.
Definitely.
And it's something that I took from a Superman novel written by this man named Elliot Magan, who wrote comics in the 70s. And he wrote this beautiful passage in a Superman novel where he talked about how the way Superman sees things, all living things, whether they're plants or animals or what have you, they all have a certain sort of glow about them. And when they die, it just fades to black. And to Superman, who's the only person who can see this, it is the most heart-wrenching, ugliest, most repulsive thing he can see. And so he treasures life that way. The watching the light fade as something dies just really hurts him, like inside.
I can imagine.
Yeah, so I really like. So I tried to bring that in with Birthright. They weren't. That didn't stick. But what I'm pleased about is when the movie Man of Steel came out.
Yeah.
I wasn't a big fan of the ending.
Yeah,
wasn't
I know
my
exactly
favorite
what
part.
you mean.
But there were things that they took from Birthright that they put in the movie that I was very pleased with. The idea that the S is a symbol that stands for hope, for instance.
True.
These are things that that as somebody who grew up reading Superman and loved Superman all his life, that it fills me with pleasure to see that certain things that I contributed to the mythology seem to have, gone on and sort of taken root and become part of the overall mythos. That's very flattering.
All right. Let's hang on a sec.
Sure.
Okay, we just need to make a small interruption in the session, sorry. It's just an announcement to tell people, please take care of your wallets and belongings, and please keep moving in the aisles. Don't block the flow. This is a police order for us. That's why we needed to interrupt the session. I'm really sorry about that. So please, people, take care of your wallets and all your belongings, and please keep moving along. Thank you.
Except you can stand here. That's okay. You guys can stand right there. All right.
So I'm actually going to start moving on from Superman because we could talk about this almost forever, but
I could talk about Superman for days, so it's probably best if we move along. Yes.
Just a quick last question on the Superman concept. Given the iconic nature and larger than life he is, was there a lot of pressure when you had to reimagine the origin, or?
No, because I've been in my mind, Superman has been my best friend since I was about 15 years old. So
fair enough.
It just felt very natural to be able to tell the story. Yeah.
The next one I wanted to refer to was where this is from, which is Heaven's Ladder.
Oh, Heaven's Ladder, yeah.
Justice League story.
Yeah.
I actually wanted to touch on that because it was a story that when I first read it, it just completely blew my mind.
Thank you.
The way they stole the planets to build a DNA chain and give birth to literally to create heaven.
Yes.
But it's such a unusual concept to have seen. I've never seen anything like it. Like, what made you choose that?
Well, it's when you work with Brian Hitch, who was the artist. Whenever you work with Brian Hitch, Brian, who works mostly he did the Ultimates over at Marvel. He works big. He likes to do. He likes giant, huge stories on a colossal galactic scale.
Oh, yeah.
And actually, it was his idea for the very beginning that aliens steal the planet Earth, and that's how the story begins.
Okay.
But then it was up to me to figure out why that would be and what came of that. And what I always do when I work on a group book like Justice League or Avengers or X-Men or anything like that is I think about the individual characters and I try to find something some concept or some idea that they would each have a different take on because it creates contrast within the group.
True enough.
So when you have an Amazon who knows the gods by first name, and you have Batman who, for all I know, is an atheist, if not an agnostic, and you have Superman who is a god himself, and you put all these characters in, with their different religions and their different personal pantheons, aliens like Martian Manhunter, what do they think heaven is? What do they think of God? What do they think is the afterlife? And so I built a story that was able to, they gave me the mechanism by which I could have the other characters sort of come into conflict with each other and explore those ideas.
Nice. have to admit, one of my favorite moments was not really as much the big scale, but it was the Atom asking Superman what happened when he died.
Yes.
It was just a quiet conversation between friends, but it was what you just referred to. It was the ideology. It was
Thank
what
you.
they saw.
That's the whole job of writing superheroes is you're not writing the super part. You're writing the human part. You start with what makes them real people first, and you have to look at the world through their eyes. So if you're gonna, I don't care. There's no difference to me between writing a superhero and writing an ordinary street person or an ordinary citizen. You start from the inside.
So okay. So after this, I actually wanted to touch on some of the event stories which you've worked on.
Sure.
You started with the Underworld Unleashed, which
Right.
was way back.
Which is way back,
I
yeah.
think a lot of people here might not have actually come across it since it's not too well publicized.
It's not too well publicized. Yeah.